What is your single biggest fear? Don't just think of an answer, feel it. Let the image of it come to mind. Spiders, heights, public speaking, failure. What would it mean for your life, truly, if you could not just manage that fear, but completely conquer it, starting today? I'm going to show you 5 universal tactics to do exactly that. And to prove they work, we're not going to stay in the realm of theory. I found 2 women, Nora and Angelica, who are paralyzed by one of the most common fears, driving. Their terror is real, it's visceral. And I made them a promise that using this system, we could crush this fear permanently. This is the story of that experiment. But it's also a blueprint. I'm Sam Carter, and I know this journey intimately. Not from a textbook, but because I once stood at a crossroads in my own life, paralyzed by a different kind of fear, the fear of a meaningless existence. The path to conquering that feeling is what we're going to walk together today. Because what we're really talking about isn't just fear, it's freedom. So, where do we begin? The foundation for attacking any fear isn't some motivational platitude. It's a well-documented psychological principle called exposure therapy. Now, this isn't just about facing your fears in a blaze of glory. That's a movie trope. Real change is more systematic. It's a process of taking the very thing that terrifies you and exposing yourself to it in controlled, gradual doses. The goal isn't to be brave, it's to be methodical. It's to teach your brain a new lesson over and over until it has no choice but to be rewired. You wouldn't try to conquer a fear of heights by teleporting to the top of the Eiffel Tower. You'd start on a second-floor balcony. You'd stay there until your heart rate returned to normal. Then a third-floor balcony, then a fourth. You build the ladder as you climb it. We were going to apply this exact logic to driving. But to understand why this works, you have to understand a fundamental truth about your own mind. It is, for better or worse, an association machine. Think of the part of your brain that handles fear like a loyal but slightly dim-witted bodyguard. The first time you, as a child, touch a hot stove, that bodyguard gets burned. In that instant, it creates a simple, ironclad, life-saving rule. Stove equals pain. From that moment on, your bodyguard doesn't care if the stove is off, cold, or unplugged. Its job is to scream danger every time you get near it. The association is locked in. It's primitive, it's powerful, and it's designed to keep you safe. Our deepest fears are just like that. They are rooted in powerful, negative associations from our past. For Angelica, this wasn't an analogy, it was a memory. A traumatic car accident in her childhood had forged an unbreakable link in her mind. Car equals danger. It didn't matter that she was now a capable adult. The bodyguard in her brain was still that terrified child. For Nora, the association was more subtle, but just as potent. Her father, in a misguided attempt to protect her, had spent her entire life filling her head with neurotic warnings and graphic stories about dying in a car crash. For her, the equation was car equals death. It was a fear she had inherited. So our first test was designed to be the bottom rung of the ladder. A quiet, empty road in a retirement community. No traffic, no pressure. The plan was to just drive, slowly. But the reality was a shock. Even at 20 miles per hour, the fear was overwhelming. You could see it. Nora's hands locked on the wheel, her knuckles white. Angelica's eyes darting everywhere, scanning for threats that didn't exist. This wasn't just driving. This was survival. And this is a critical point. The initial exposure isn't just about performing the action, it's about bringing the associated emotions to the surface so you can finally process them. Angelica's deep-seated paranoia, Nora's crushing self-criticism, it all came bubbling up in that car. It was ugly, it was painful, and it was absolutely necessary. Now, think about a fear that you have. What would your first small step of exposure therapy be? That second-floor balcony? And what could a form of orthogonal exposure, which we're about to discuss, look like for you? Share your ideas in the comments below. Your idea might be the one that inspires someone else to take their first step. But here's the problem we faced. Progress was happening, but it felt like failure. The sheer stress of the exposure was taking its toll. A simple, linear approach wasn't going to be enough. We needed a strategic curveball. This is where we introduce our second technique, orthogonal exposure. The word sounds complex, but the idea is elegant. To overcome a specific fear, you attack a related but different activity. You come at the fear from the side. The venture capitalist Paul Graham famously wrote about his fear of flying. He didn't conquer it by taking more flights, he conquered it by learning to hang glide. He learned to understand the air, to feel its currents, to see it as a medium to be navigated, not an empty space to fall through. By mastering a related skill, he rewrote his core association with being in the air. I have a friend who was terrified of heights. He learned to ski. The exhilaration, the control, and the repetitive, safe experience of being on a high mountain completely reframed his relationship with altitude. So, for Nora and Angelica, we needed to find an activity that involved speed, steering, and focus, but wasn't a car. We hit the go-kart track. The shift was immediate. The playful environment, the smaller scale, the sense of competition, it decoupled the act of driving fast from the feeling of terror. For the first time, we saw genuine smiles. They were building new, positive associations with speed and control, creating a resource of confidence they could draw on later. They were attacking the fear orthogonally. But go-karting is one thing. To truly reset their baseline for fear, we needed something far more extreme. We had to find their absolute limit. Anytime you're learning a new skill, progress lives in what's called the Goldilocks zone. It's that delicate place where the task is not so easy that you're bored and not so impossibly hard that you give up. It has to be just at the edge of your ability. It's like learning public speaking. Your Goldilocks zone isn't giving a TED Talk on day one. That's impossibly hard. But it's also not just reading your speech to yourself in the mirror. That's too easy. It's presenting for 2 minutes to a small, supportive group of 3 friends. It's challenging enough to make your heart race, but not so terrifying that you shut down. We needed to find Nora and Angelica's Goldilocks zone, and for that we introduced our third and most powerful technique, altitude training for the mind. The term is inspired by the legendary marathoner Eliud Kipchoge. He trains at 8,000 feet of elevation, where the air is thin and every step is a struggle. Why? Because when he comes down to sea level for a race, it feels effortless by comparison. He intentionally makes the training much harder than the final event. We were going to do the same for their fear. We were going to amplify the difficulty so dramatically that normal driving would feel simple by comparison. Our altitude was a professional racetrack, and their training was to drive a Ferrari with a single goal: hit 120 miles per hour, more than double the freeway speed that terrified them. This is the moment of truth. This is where the system is tested under maximum pressure. Before she even got in the car, Angelica was visibly panicked. Her body was screaming at her, replaying the old trauma, begging her not to do this. This is the wall. This is the moment most people turn back. You could see the internal battle playing out on her face. Her fear bodyguard was having a full-blown meltdown. But she got in the car. With a professional instructor by her side, talking her through every turn, her fear began to compete with a new sensation, the raw capability of the machine around her, the roar of the engine, the precise grip of the tires. She started with tentative laps, her fear still in the driver's seat. But the instructor kept pushing her, urging her to trust the car, to trust herself. And then something incredible happened. On the main straightaway, the instructor told her to go for it, and she did. The speedometer climbed 90, 100, 110. The sound was deafening, the world outside a blur. She flew past the 120 miles per hour, her fear turning into pure focused adrenaline. She peaked at an unbelievable 125 miles per hour. When she pulled back into the pit lane and the engine fell silent, she was trembling. But this time, it wasn't from fear. It was from the aftershock of what she had just done. She had met her ultimate fear, and not only survived it, but dominated it. There's a quote from Will Smith that I've always loved. He said, "The best things in life are on the other side of our fears. The greater the fear, the greater the joy waiting for you on the other side." And we saw that joy, pure and unfiltered. As Angelica took off her helmet, the look on her face wasn't relief, it was shock, and then a slow-blooming, genuine smile. "It was so much fun," she said, almost surprised at her own words. Surprisingly. That was the emotional release. That was the reward. But we had to solidify it. We had to apply our fourth technique, making it fun. How do you permanently transform a source of terror into a source of joy? You create an overwhelmingly positive new memory that eclipses the old one. So, we rented a Lamborghini, and we just drove the Las Vegas Strip at night. The activity that was once isolating and terrifying was now a source of social reward. People were pointing, waving, taking pictures. The car was no longer a potential coffin, it was a magnet for positive attention. They were laughing, they were having fun. They were, in real time, overwriting the old, painful association with a new, powerful, joyful one. But the journey wasn't over. The final test was yet to come, and it was a surprise. That night, I told them there were no return flights booked to Los Angeles. The only way home was to drive. A 294-mile road trip from Las Vegas to Santa Monica, through the empty expanse of the desert, over winding mountain passes, and into the belly of the beast, notorious LA traffic. And they would have to do it all themselves. This final challenge wasn't about speed or technique, it was about applying everything they had learned in the real world. And it points to the fifth and deepest strategy of all, identity formation. Here is the most profound truth about this process. Repeated activities become your identity. If you repeatedly avoid something out of fear, your identity becomes, "I am a person who is afraid of X." But if you repeatedly and successfully engage with that thing, you are forging a new identity. By driving that Ferrari, by cruising the Vegas Strip, by undertaking this epic road trip, they were systematically dismantling the statement, "I am afraid to drive." They could no longer say, "I've never enjoyed driving," because they now had the memory of joy in the Lamborghini. They could no longer say, "I can't handle long distances," because they were in the middle of conquering 294 miles. And there was one last, unspoken strategy that made it all possible. The sixth asset: alliance. Nora and Angelica had each other. They were allies. When one was struggling, the other provided support. They created accountability. Conquering a great fear is very rarely a solo mission. It requires stakes, support, and the knowledge that someone else is on the journey with you. Find an ally. The road trip was a triumph. They navigated the desert, they handled the traffic, they arrived in Santa Monica not as victims of their fear, but as architects of their own courage. They proved to themselves, and to us, what is possible when you decide to stop living in the shadow of a fear and start systematically dismantling it. This is the blueprint. Find an ally. Set the stakes. Start with small, gradual exposures. When you hit a wall, attack from the side with orthogonal exposure. To make a leap, use altitude training to reset your baseline. And finally, reward yourself. Make it fun. Create new positive memories. Because every time you do, you're not just facing a fear, you're forging a new identity. It's the fuel that resonated with you, and you want more deep dives into the psychology of a meaningful life, make sure to like and subscribe. It's the fuel that keeps this channel going. And a quick heads up, content that challenges the status quo this directly can be controversial. Make sure to save this video now, because you never know when it might disappear.